Greetings and welcome to the Classical Guitar Composers Podcast, episode number 4. I am your host, Chris Hales, and I am once again very pleased to have you joining me today. And if you are joining me for the first time, the Classical Guitar Composers Podcast is a podcast that features original guitar music, classical guitar music sent in by listeners. If you are a classical guitar composer, this is your show. This show is for you. And if you're not a composer, but you enjoy good classical guitar music, this show is also for you. Yeah, you certainly don't have to be a guitar composer, or even a player. You just need to enjoy guitar music. But I'd assume most of you listening are guitarists in some capacity. You know, like if you go to, I'd say like 90% of the attendees at any given professional guitar recital are classical guitarists at various levels. It's just one of those things. It's like disc golf, you know. I love disc golf. I sit and watch disc golf tournaments on YouTube, and I play disc golf, and I don't think there is one person at one of these tournaments who does not play disc golf themselves, because otherwise they're just not that interested. Unlike classical guitar, though, disc golf really isn't that interesting if you're not playing it, but classical guitar music is beautiful whether you play it or not. And I honestly don't understand why it's not more popular than it is. And I don't know, maybe it's just overshadowed by rock guitar and such, so, kids who want to learn the guitar are not usually choosing classical. I certainly didn't. The very first thing I ever learned to play was Back in Black by AC/DC, and I learned classical guitar. I got into that much farther down the road. Okay, so today we are featuring two composers again, which I'm very happy about, and one of them actually sent in two pieces, and what I think I'm going to do is just play one of those, and I'm going to save the second piece for the next episode. The submissions are not flying in, I'm not going to lie, as quickly as I'd hoped, but at least I am getting some, and so far they've all been really, really good, including the ones today. And so as long as I have material, I'll keep doing a show. And but I'm going to spread the submission by, I'll talk about him in a little bit, David Malmberg. I'm going to play one of his pieces this week and one next week. And if it starts getting really scarce with the submissions, maybe I'll feature a few more of my own. But I just trying to save those for a rainy day because I like doing the podcast, and I really want it to survive. I know I'm so grateful for all of you guys who have sent music in so far. You're welcome to send in more anytime. You certainly don't have to limit yourself to one episode, but the show still is relatively new, and it is growing, and so I keep seeing that I see the listeners, the listener count is growing, and so just hopefully the submissions will start to grow along with them. But nonetheless, we have two today to feature, and I'm very, very much looking forward to that. At the very least, one good thing that, for me personally, that's come out of doing this podcast is I have started practicing my guitar a little more seriously again. I've been so lazy about it for, the past few years. and so I've been just trying to get like a recital's worth of pieces in my fingers, which might be a little, I might be taking on too much of a heavy load, but I'm going for it. I just turned I'll tell you guys something about myself. I usually turn on a TV in the background, and I don't really watch it. I just have it going in the background while I practice. I don't know, something about it. I think it helps me focus. I don't know, maybe that's BS, but I think it does. So I'll turn on like some obscure horror movie or something in the background, or a lot of the times I'll turn on Bob Ross. I was thinking, can you imagine if Bob Ross had been a composer? If he were a musician rather than a painter? I mean, it's a great show, as it is, but, you know. Hello, my friends, and welcome to The Joy of Music. I'm your host, Bob Ross. Certainly glad you could be with us today. And we're just going to go ahead and put a happy little C chord. We're just going to play a happy little C chord right here. C's a very happy key, but you could put yours in C minor. It's your piece. You can do what you want. It's your world. And that C chord, he's going to need a friend. Let's go ahead and add a G chord here. Don't want him to get lonely. You just take that G chord and you beat the devil out of it. I love Bob Ross. So there you go. You've learned something about your host. Let's see. Maybe I can do a get to know your host segment. Let's see. We've established that I like Bob Ross, and I leave the TV on while I practice guitar. I like to go frisbee golfing, or discing, as it's often called. Much cooler way to say it. Let's see. I drink a lot of iced tea. I love iced tea, as you've probably noticed in previous episodes. Let's see. Pipe tobacco. Yeah. And I do not care for the Beatles. And I could quite honestly, I would be just fine if I never hear another Beatles arrangement at a guitar recital again. That'll be just fine with me. Yeah, they're not the worst. I mean, they're actually a good band. I don't care for their sound. I don't like their voices. I like their songs a lot more when they're covered by bands that I like. So please don't stop listening over that. This is, after all, a classical guitar podcast. We should not punish the composers this week for my what many would consider sacrilege. So there you go. That's enough. I'll share more next time. I'll just give you a little bit of Chris each episode. Let's see. Okay, I'm stalling. I feel like it's going to be a really short podcast this week. Maybe. I'm going to tell you a story about an awkward situation I had in college. I was doing the end of semester juries where you play your pieces for the semester for judges, and one was my teacher, and one was the only other guitar teacher there was at that time. My teacher used to always say that Sohr was our Mozart, Fernando Sohr, regarding like guitar. The closest thing we have, I guess. And I played, I think it would have been the grand solo, or maybe it was the theme and variations by the Mozart theme. I can't remember. But anyway, I played it, and my teacher turned to the other guy, and he says, "Yeah, he's our Mozart." He was talking about Fernando Sohr, but the other dude, I think, thought that he was talking about me, like, he's our little Mozart. The other dude's like, sure. I was so embarrassed, and I didn't say anything. Yeah, I'm stalling. You know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I am still going to split David's pieces. We're going to do one this week, one next week. Not next week, I mean next month, whenever I do the next episode. And I'll throw in one of mine today, because we just need a little more music, and then we'll see what happens next month. But at the very least, we will have something by David Malmberg again. And if this ends up not being too short, then I'll just go ahead and cut all this out. Anyway, so let's do that. Let's go ahead and have that moment where I'd encourage you to pause the podcast, get yourself a nice cold beverage, iced tea in my case, of course, and let's sit back and listen to these. So I'm going to go ahead and play you one of mine first, and then we will follow that by our two submissions. So I'm just gonna throw this one in here. This is a Passacaglia for 3 guitars. This is a piece I wrote for organ, I think in 2009. Hold on, I'm gonna check the date on this. Okay, yeah. So 2009. I was studying Baroque counterpoint. That's I've told you guys my favorite composer's Bach, and so I was working with Dr. Martin Pond, and we were working on this counterpoint, and so I wrote this organ piece, and it's just totally Baroque. At some point, I decided to put it on guitars. I think that's right. I was getting a trio going that never got off the ground, and so I wanted to hurry and get something for us to play, and so I rearranged it for 3 guitars, and so it has this repeating bass line. If you're not familiar with a Passacaglia, it's just essentially a piece in 3/4 usually written over just a repeating bass line. So in this case, that bass line just gets passed around between the 3 guitars like a hot potato, and it eventually moves through the upper voices before it tires of its little adventure and comes on home. Enjoy. All right, that was Passacaglia in D minor by yours truly. I wrote a handful of pieces in that Baroque style, and I'm gonna try to throw them in here and there, but hopefully not too soon. I really hope to just throw them in on slow days when we don't have many submissions. But there's one for you now. All right, so this next piece is by a composer named Stephen Kenyon. This was commissioned by somebody who wanted to present the piece to his wife on her birthday. And so he commissioned Stephen to write this piece. So this is called Song for Allison by Stephen Kenyon. there it is. That was Song for Allison by Stephen Kenyon. And as usual, I will be posting information on where you can find more about today's composers on classicalguitarcomposers.com. So you just go to classicalguitarcomposers.com. There should be a post up for today's episode right on the front page, and you can get that info there. Stephen sending in that music from Dorset, England. I believe is where it says he's located here. So, it's a global show. Actually, there's a few listeners across the pond, I've noticed. And that's just awesome. So, thank you, Stephen, very much for sending that in. I appreciate it. Okay, and last, we have a piece by David Malmberg, and he had some kind words about the show. Thank you very much, David. I really appreciate that. And David also writes, I'm a composer of works for the guitar based out of Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota. I took my studies in Spain many years ago. My compositions are diverse, from traditional to contemporary, and at times a few vocals thrown in to boot. So as I said before, David sent in 2 works, and I've decided to split them just for survival reasons. So I'm going to go ahead and play today this one called, oh boy, Chibiabos. I have no idea how to say this. I'm sorry. We're going to go with Chibiabos. And this is based on the Longfellow poem, The Song of Hiawatha. Very dear to Hiawatha was the gentle Chibiabos. He the best of all musicians. He the sweetest of all singers. We have just heard Chibiabos. Oh boy, I am sorry, David, if I am pronouncing that wrong. By David Malmberg. And that's it for this week. I want to thank you all for joining me. I look forward to the next episode where we will feature another piece by David and hopefully some other composers as well. I want to again thank both David Malmberg and Stephen Kenyon for sharing their music with me today and with you. And if you have a guitar piece that you would like to have featured on the podcast, the only requirement is that it is a piece for classical guitar. It can have any other combination of instruments or whatever, as long as it features the classical guitar. That's all I ask, and that it's an actual recording of a guitar and not like a finale file, at least for the guitar part. I don't care if you have fake violins with guitar. Let's just make sure we have a nice real guitar featured. So if you want to send that in, you can send it to chris@classicalguitarcomposers.com. Just send me an MP3 recording along with any information you want to include about your piece and yourself, and I will feature it on the podcast. I'm not going to critique it. We're just going to play it. And once again, that's chris@classicalguitarcomposers.com. I want to thank you all again one last time for joining me. I will see you in about a month. It's rough out there, but keep on plucking.